Well, a very, very happy Tuesday, and welcome to another episode of the TNC Sports Talk. My name is Justin. Today is February 17th of 2026, and we are here with another episode. A little bit of stuff to talk about. We'll recap Raw from last night. We'll talk about some Bengals football as possible trade suggestions have popped up for the Bengals and possibly Trey Hendrickson that we could take notice on. Couple reports coming out of Major League Baseball, but the first one I wanted to get into and jump into this evening is the position for the Cincinnati Reds and his expectations. So I was listening to the Locked On Reds podcast because I like to listen to what everyone else is talking about when it comes down to the Bengals and to the Reds and just Cincinnati sports. I was tuning into the Locked On Reds podcast, and they were talking about Eugenio Suarez and his position when it comes to contributing for the team. And they brought up a little bit of a different perspective than I noticed. And I want to keep this an open conversation for everyone else. They suggested that Suarez actually gets his playing time at third base. And this was something that was just a conversation between the people on the Locked On Reds podcast saying that his best performance is going to be on the field and that moving Brian Hayes to the bench could hopefully utilize his potential a lot more. And so it actually got me eager, and I'm going to pop it up here. And we talk about his stats from last season. He was batting .235, playing third base. He had 5 home runs. He had 49 RBIs and 124 hits. Now, yesterday on this podcast, we talked about what is his, or how is he how can we utilize this roster? And I had Brian Hayes at third base, and I also had Suarez as a designated hitter. And so let's just take a look for a moment what it would look like if Hayes moved to the person off the bench. Because there's multiple people that could play third base. I'm still in favor of Suarez being primarily a DH caliber player this year. He gets to focus on protecting the top of the batting order. He gets to have a power at bat in that roster. And as a 34-year-old who hit 49 home runs in 2025 between the Arizona Diamondbacks and the Seattle Mariners, he is the only active third baseman with 49 home runs in a season compared to his other coming with the Reds in 2019. So this is what he said. I've heard about people yelling at me to hit 60 home runs in Cincinnati or 50. It's really fun, but I take it seriously. They believe I can do it. What I can do. 60 home runs season, while that doesn't feel realistic, it is certainly possible. He's the only one season since the COVID-19 shortened season with less than 30 home runs. Projected that Suarez would hit 54 home runs if he was playing for the Reds at Great American Ballpark. For the first time in his career, he will have a primary DH role. This gives him even more time to focus on hitting. The team says he will also get reps at third and first this year during spring, giving players like Brian Hayes and Sal Stewart days to rest and to be used as a DH. Cross said to bring a guy in that is a middle of the order at bat and hits 49 home runs last year. He's a great clubhouse guy, great with all the fans. You know what you're getting with him. He's just a tremendous individual, and it's really been something that we weren't sure we were going to be able to get. But it was great that we were able to get Gino. Suarez goes on to say in this article, I still have my part of the family here. My daughter was born here. My wife and I think we made a good decision to come back here. And so at the end of the day, Suarez, where does he play at? Now, if you're asking me, I think that Suarez will have a very good time just dial in, focusing on home runs, focusing on RBIs, filling in as that DH position. I feel like Suarez is just in that this is where you gotta utilize him the most. Sure, you could play him at third base. Sure, you could teach him to play first base, and it wouldn't be a bad idea. But we got to remember why we re-signed him to begin with. We did not re-sign him because he's a gold glover at third. We signed him because he hit 49 home runs. And if we could give him the opportunity to dial in and focus on hitting those home runs and have a few runners on base while doing so, then I think it is in best interest of the organization to put him as the DH. If we do that, though, it means that Brian Hayes is going to have to play third base. And unless we decide that someone like Noelvi Marte, Spencer Steer, Sal Stewart, or even Encarnacion Strand can play third base, then I think his time on the corners are going to be limited. And they should be limited, with all due respect. Brian Hayes, let's face it, and let's be real for a moment. Offensively, he doesn't bring a lot to the table. He batted .235. He hit 5 home runs. He had 49 RBIs. But we didn't trade for Brian Hayes because of his offensive power. We wanted to get his defensive skill level. We wanted to get some insurance on the left side of the field along with Ellie De La Cruz. We sacrificed a third baseman who's probably going to hit 7th, 8th, or 9th in the lineup so that we can substitute him for... We could substitute his at-bats for his gold glove skills. So it's important that we remember that why we are having the situation we're at. Sure, Brian Hayes or Suarez is good, is a decent defender. Nothing compared to what Hayes brought up or has to offer. I question Suarez to being a first baseman. I'm not saying it's impossible. I think it would be great. But we are focusing on third base, where we only have watched Suarez play at throughout his years. So I am saying here today that I prefer to keep things the way they are. Now, let's face it, we are going to have to, at some time, have Suarez play a little bit on the field. Right? He's going to have to give, he can't be the DH for 162 games. But I do feel, and I strongly feel about this, that Suarez is very limited. Now, just because he's limited, let's talk about Ke'Bryan Hayes for a moment. If we don't think that his at-bats are credible enough to fit in the lineup on a daily basis, which will undervalue everything that we did to go pick him up for the next 4 years, then how do we put him on the bench? And who do we play at third base that's not Suarez? You could play Sal Stewart. You could play Christian Encarnacion. I think of Noelvi Marte. I think of Spencer Steer. We have different options. And if you take someone from the outfield, you're replacing him with a Will Benson or a J.J. Bleday. If you're putting someone else on the infield, well, you're either going to put Sal Stewart, who I still think gets a lot of his reps at first base, or in Christian Encarnacion Strand. I was listening to this the other day, and I wanted to weigh in on this because the other option was on the other side of the field and bringing up Nathaniel Lowe. Now, Nathaniel Lowe, excuse me, allergies this evening. Now, Nathaniel Lowe only plays first base. And I can see why somebody likes to bring up someone who could provide it at bat, especially someone who's coming off the bench. But then who are you going to send down? Now, I'm not saying that. I don't know if Christian Encarnacion is going to be healthy come opening day. But I like his versatile concept. I like that he's able to play around the bush. And he could play around the horn in different positions. And I like that versatility coming from different parts of the bench. I feel like it's very important. So, in my honest opinion, when Nathaniel Lowe as a first baseman, unless you're planning on starting him, which then you're taking Sal Stewart and you're giving him another year in the minors, at least to begin the year, maybe you bring him up after a couple months and have him work his way in. That's an option. But if that's the option, what do you do with your bench? And so in another fantasy world, I would have Christian Encarnacion at third, Nathaniel Lowe at first, Ke'Bryan Hayes coming off the bench, Suarez the DH, and I would also have Sal Stewart down in the minors. That's a lot to take in, no? I just want to remind everyone that this leads to a good competent or competitive level from Terry Francona and this Reds organization. Players are going to have to earn their role on the roster day in and day out. I would purposely tell Suarez, look, you are a DH. We will ask you to play third and first from time to time. But your role is to drive in runs. Is to do what you do best and hit home runs. And to be this player that you were last year. That is your main priority. Don't worry about defense. Don't worry about anything else other than hitting home runs. And let everything else fall into place. But to see Suarez every day at third base, at least majority of the time, I think is unethical. And I think it will distract Suarez from what he is out to accomplish. And it would backfire the trade that we had on Brian Hayes at third base. So we give up a batting average. We give up a batting average to fill in the 8th and 9th slot of the lineup. But what are we gaining? We're getting competent coming from the left side of the field. We're getting a completion, a 1-2 punch combination that puts this left side of the field among the elite compared to the rest of all the other teams. So the question is, what would you do? Is Suarez a DH player? Should he only focus on his at-bats? Or does he prepare to play at least majority of his time at third base and majority of his time at first base, preventing the opportunities given to guys like Sal Stewart and Brian Hayes that we praise a lot about with this organization? There is no doubt that Major League Baseball is coming up on this argument of CBA lockout. And it was reported by Kate Fieldman and Mike Axilla on CBS Sports that MLB Player Association head Tony Clark expected to resign months before the CBA expires. Clark is currently under federal investigation regarding a licensing company. Clark, executive director of MLB Player Associations, is expected to resign, according to The Athletic on Tuesday. The stunning news comes just months before the current collective bargaining agreement is set to expire on December 1st. Marcus Seaman says you definitely don't want things to be a distraction going into December, including the New York Post on Tuesday, adding Clark did not discuss his resignation with union leadership ahead of time. So that's all I can really say. Maybe that is why it is happening now. So, I think Tony Clark is a name that references a lot to the collective bargaining agreement with Major League Baseball. He is a player's advocate that has really stood at the forefront of a lot of these negotiations over the last several years. And there's no doubt that he is out here to protect the players. I think that this year's CBA agreement is going to be a little bit interesting to view, especially after seeing contracts signed that have been a little bit outrageous, like Kyle Tucker's, that we saw with the Dodgers earlier this year. And, the overall question is going to be who is replacing Tony Clark? Because I know he's not the only one making the final decisions, but he represents the Players Association. And when you have a guy who has built his reputation on defending the players and you have to bring in somebody new, it is some tall shoes to fill by anyone, no matter who you are. And, I can only resemble this back around to when Vince McMahon had to step down as CEO of the WWE, as, head of talent relations. And, he was behind reins on everything and every decision that was made in the WWE and what goes on in the product out there in the ring. Well, when Paul Levesque comes in, we know who Paul Levesque was. We knew what Paul Levesque was all about. We knew what type of storylines he was going to bring up and how he was going to run business, and he has successfully done so this far. But don't get it twisted, because he's had some very tall shoes to fill. And he has been able to conquer that in the way that he's been putting this business together over the last few years. So, in hindsight, I look at this and I think that the player associations are losing a top-tier player or a person that has protected them for numerous of years. I'm a little bit skeptic of who's going to come in and represent the Players Association, and they also, and what type of relationship they have with MLB owners. It comes December 31st when owners, and so majority of the owners at least, want a salary cap. Who is this next person going to weigh size on? And you would only hope that he is in favor of the players, but he's also willing to compromise and work out some big other deals. So, all right, I want to move in to MLB offseason grades. This comes from Dane Perry on CBS Sports. He gives in his opinion on the grades that Major League Baseball has had this offseason. All right. So we start off with the Arizona Diamondbacks, where Perry gives them a B grade. Best moves this offseason wasn't a move at all. It was rather the decision of not trading All-Star Ketel Marte. Elsewhere, Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly are back in the rotation. Michael Soroka is also another new addition, as well as Nolan Arenado, Carlos Santana. Probably don't move the needle all that much, but it gives manager Toy Lavolo some tactical options. That's not that bad of a grade. So, moving on to the Athletics, is given a C. The A's were committed to Tyler Soderstrom and Jacob Wilson for the long term. They're getting Jeff McNeil for a cheap upgrade as at second base. On the other hand, A's didn't do enough to address their flawed rotation. Aaron Savali doesn't get the job done at the end of the day. The Atlanta Braves also receive a C. The story of the 2026 Braves will largely be told whether by they get some rebound performances in the lineup and whether the roster is able to be healthier than it was last season. Spencer Schwellenbach is already headed to the 60-day IL, which is not a great start. While the Braves did not make any huge splashes this winter, newly arrived Mike Yastrzemski is a useful platoon bat in the left. Robert Suarez provides depth on high leverage options in the bullpen. Shortstop, however, remains to be the trouble spot. The Baltimore Orioles receive a letter B grade. They've had guys like Pete Alonso and Taylor Ward to the organization. Also added Shane Baez to the rotation in a trade. Zach Eflin and inking chase Chris Bassett. They also fleshed out bullpen Ryan Hesley and Andrew Kittredge from their right side. The price trade for Baez, however, was high. The O's still don't have an ace they need. The Red Sox get a B+, as the Sox forfeited the front of the rotation behind Garrett Crochet with the additions of Ranger Suarez, Tony Gray, and Johan Oviedo, as well as Wilson Contreras. Right-handed thump should play well in Fenway. On the downside, Alec Bregman's departure and free agent will be nearly felt in the infield and in the lineup. The Cubs also get a B. We get an average B as they lost Kyle Tucker to the Dodgers. But they also did get Alex Bregman in addition, and the trade for Edward Cabrera deepens the rotation in the bullpen. And then also, but the Cubs widely resisted a temptation to trade away second baseman Nico Horner. The White Sox get a B+. And he evaluated grade largely because of the signing of the Munetaka Murakami on a 2-year contract. He's known for he's not a known quantity, but he is a power upside that makes this a very worthwhile low risk endeavor for Chicago. The trade from Luis Roberts deal wasn't practically impressive. They didn't finally pull the trigger on it. The Anthony Kay and Sean Newcomb signings will help the team overall, at least. The Reds get a C-, adding J.J. Bleday and Dane Myers, freeing up and letting people walk like Austin Hayes, Nick Martinez, and Miguel Andujar will be missed from the roster, but Eugenio Suarez makes up a lot of that and makes it worth it. And C- also belongs to the Cleveland Guardians. Guardians will mostly be running back in 2026. Yes, they made the playoffs thanks to a miracle finish on the regular season, but at heart, this is a team that was outscored by opposition in 2025. They really need to address multiple spots in the lineup this winter, but the Dolans remains as uninterested and neglectful as ever. The Rockies get a B-. Coming off one of the worst seasons in MLB history, the Rockies badly need a reboot and step toward modernizing all of baseball operations. They did that, at least in theory, by bringing in Paul DePodesta as the new lead decision maker. That's the biggest move of the winter in Denver. Paul has been out of the game for a long time, but still constitutes a major step forward for the organization. Elsewhere, taking a swing at Eduardo Julian as a buy low post type youngster is a sound move. The Tigers receive an A as they was able to successfully approach Tariq Schoolball's arbitration case, and instead of praising them, not trading him ahead of his walk year, Detroit also signed Framber Valdez and re-signed Justin Verlander to help strengthen their rotation. The Astros get a B after the loss of Framber Valdez, which was a rough one. They've done a solid job of preparing over his loss by signing Tatsuya Amaya and trading Mike Burrows and plucking Ryan Weiss out of Korea. As results, there's now impressive rotation depth despite the loss of their bedrock to the Tigers. The infield situation remains, but crowded, also doubles as depth that might be useful. The Kansas City Royals will get a B as well. The Royals' best move this winter was inking in a massive Michael Garcia to a long-term extension. There's also been some needed to the bullpen. Matt Strahm signing in particularly to welcome in development. And the addition of Lane Thomas improves the KC bench. The Bengals get a B. They've always kind of been pretty active during the offseason. Getting potentially 4 years of Grayson Rodriguez for 1 year Taylor Ward. It's a great play by the Halos. Although Rodriguez has not been healthy in some time, he's a revival project of sorts, exactly the kind of swing the Halos should be taking. You've also added Vaughn Grisham, Alec Mona, Drew Pomeranz, Jordan Romano, Kirby Yates, all making varied degrees of sense, and some of them will likely work out. All that said, it's hard to squint at the Angels being relevant in the tough AL West in 2026. This could all turn out to be a lot of a wheel spin. What I noticed out of the A's is that a lot of the people they brought up could be potential trade targets come to the trade deadline in July. So if the Angels are not in postseason contingency, they could be looking at trading some of these players like Pomeranz or Yates to contenders for some future prospects. The back-to-back champs Los Angeles Dodgers receive an A as they picked up interesting players like Kyle Tucker, Edwin Diaz, and along with the players they already have, they really have themselves a solid front. The Miami Marlins get a B+, as they include a promising Owen Cassie, trade Edward Cabrera to the Cubs. They also got good value in the Pete Fairbanks signing that shore up high leverage at the end of the bullpen. Story in Miami remains when and if they'll trade Cy Young winner Sandy Alcantara. But otherwise, the Marlins have done quality work this winter. The Milwaukee Brewers will get a C as they departed ways with some players. Freddie Peralta, for one, who's had 3 straight seasons of at least 30 starts and 200 strikeouts. Caleb Durbin, traded, was a bit of a strange one from Milwaukee's standpoint. Obviously, the organization has earned the benefits of the doubt, but in a vacuum, excuse me, sorry. But in a vacuum, these two major moves seem questionable. To be sure, the Brewers still have very much profile as contenders. Minnesota Twins receive an F. The Twins need to make improvements in order to contend in typically winnable AL Central. And their big move has been signing decline phases Josh Bell. Their behavior last year trade deadline suggested a rebuild was in offering, but the Twins didn't finish the job this winter. Trading Pablo Lopez and Joe Ryan would have been at least made the approach coherent. But instead, the Twins seem to be indulging in some half measures. The New York Mets receive a B+, despite Pete Alonso walking along with Edwin Diaz. The Mets have made some number of notable additions that kind of seem a little bit more horizontal than vertical in the progress. Adding a new scenery to Bo Bichette, Freddie Peralta, in his presence, Jorge Polanco, Marco Simeons, Luis Roberts Jr., Devin Williams, Luke Weaver. That is a significant makeover. It is one that can help the Mets get back to the postseason. Reopening the Cody Bellinger, who put up a 5.1 WAR last season in 2025, was a welcoming development, but otherwise, it was a fairly listless winter in the Bronx. On the pitching front, Ryan Weathers is the only addition into the rotation that figures to have a serious health and durability concerns in the upcoming season. Hal Steinbrenner continues to refuse going full bore for the remainder of Aaron Judge's peak. The Phillies receive a B in this grade, bringing back Kyle Schwarber, letting Nick Castellanos walk. Also bringing back JT Realmuto. Will the Phils regret letting Ranger Suarez walk? There's much writing on Zach Wheeler's return whenever he is able to take the mound. That said, youngster Andrew Painter was elite upside to the Suarez decision and is defensible elsewhere. Dolis Garcia probably doesn't adequately address their outfield issues. The Pittsburgh Pirates get a letter B grade, picking up Brandon Lowe, Ryan O'Hearn, Marcel Ozuna. Their key additions that could hope catapult them in the NL Central. The Padres get a C, bringing back Michael King, welcoming the turn of events. But Dylan Cease, ace upside, would be missed in the rotation. But they did add Sung Moon Song, comes with certain uncertainty in his abilities to hit MLB pitching, budget restrictions, and a thinned out farm system limited AJ Prelo's accomplishments this offseason. The Giants received a D. The biggest move was hiring college head coach as their manager. That's not optimal for a team trying to contend in the deep NL West. As for the moves involving actually players, there are not especially inspiring. Luis Ariz is a stretch defensively at second base, and Tyler Mahle and Adrian Hauser doesn't significantly upgrade the rotation behind the ace Logan Webb, and Harrison Bader is a useful player. The Giants really needed a true needle-moving addition this winter. The Seattle Mariners get an A. Brendan Donovan trade was an excellent targeting strike, and Jose A. Ferrer should be a strong long-term fixture. Gives the manager Dan Wilson a potential platoon bat this season. The St. Louis Cardinals receive a B+. They're trying to rebuild in their first lead decision-making. Chaim Bloom committed to it indeed. And trading away Sonny Gray, Wilson Contreras, Nolan Arenado, And Brendan Donovan, Bloom cleared paths for young contributors in 2026. Most importantly, greatly improved the organization pitching depth and upside with those returns. The on-field results probably won't be pretty in St. Louis this season, but this was necessary step. Tampa Bay Rays, a B minus. The Rays did really well with the return of Shane Baez in a trade with Baltimore. An absolute haul, really, when the signings of Steven Matz, Cedric Mullins mostly modestly helped the cause in 2026. Nick Martinez is also a sensible addition. That said, Brandon Lowe will be missed, and Gavin Lux probably won't come close to filling in the void. The Texas Rangers received a B, as the Rangers are dealing with reported financial constraints this offseason. So, that is a light. It's solid work. Brandon Nimmo and Danny Jansen are new to the lineup. The flawed bullpen has seen a great deal of overturn, and a trade for Mackenzie Gore infused the middle of the rotation with relative youth and upside. Toronto Blue Jays receive a B+. Yes, the loss of Bo Bichette to the Mets via free agency, it certainly stings, but otherwise they are reigning AL champs, did good work over the winter. Dylan Cease brings in a swing and a miss of an ace potential to the rotation. Kazuma Okamoto was a real power potential, and Tyler Rogers is also a nice addition to the bullpen. The Washington Nationals will receive a B in this grade. The Nats undertook a needed makeover in front of the office and in the dugout, and that's what drives this grade. New POBO Paul Toboni brings youth the capacity to modernize, and the Nats sorely need modernization. Getting Harry Ford is an upside in the Jose Farrow trade with Seattle was nifty move, and they got a good bulk of Mackenzie Gore trade with Texas. So, out of all 30 of those ball clubs, which grade level would you have put for your favorite ball club? Let me know down in the comments below. For me, when I look at this grade level, I feel like it's pretty accurate. I feel like maybe there's a few flaws here and there. For example, the Mets, they're scored in as a B. They got rid of some players, trying to open up their payroll, and they've added a few. Both Bichette, I think, is a really big game changer for the Mets. Freddie Peralta, another one. Devin Williams could contribute to this organization significantly, but I do believe that this would be something that they move horizontally with, and have they better themselves. When you look at the rest of the National League East, I guess you struggle to find, well, did who made the biggest improvements and the biggest splash? And I got to be honest with you, that I believe belongs to the New York Mets. The Braves didn't do anything. The Marlins really didn't add any. The Nationals, same boat. And the Phillies, their offseason was bringing back Kyle Schwarber and JT Realmuto and departing ways with Nick Castellanos. It's hard to say that I would agree with the Miami Marlins grade level being a B, but yet, I don't know too much about Miami. The Angels getting a B. They've added some players, and like I said, they can use these players for potential trades coming up in July against competitors. So that's kind of how the organization has always been. The Dodgers getting an A. In comparison to the Tigers getting an A, I think they really made some big drastic moves. The Rockies getting a B. The Reds getting a C. And I mean, I can't really argue with it. Our biggest addition to the Reds organization was a Eugenio Suarez. And prior to that, when you sign up guys like JJ Bleday and Dave Myers, you got to ask yourself, who are they and what are we actually getting? Then, the question is asked for itself right then and there. So what do you guys think of this deal and these grades? Do you agree with any of them? Let me know down in the comments below. But before we get into our final conversation of the day, I want to talk about Grassroots, presented by Enlightened Studios, coming up here from March 27th through February 27th through March 8th at the Artsville Theater in Cincinnati, Ohio. Grassroots is a theater production set in the 1950s, telling this story about when a black family moves into an all-white neighborhood. They deal with adversity and some drama. The truth comes out in the neighborhood and in the family. And this is a story you don't want to miss. Get your tickets today by visiting tickettailor.com and join Enlightened Studios for their upcoming production. And I want to see you out there. So get your tickets today. All right. So I'm not going to read too much into this, but I wanted to jump into the Cincinnati Bengals real quick because it seems that they may have an interest in a trade. The Dallas Cowboys have a lot of decisions to make this offseason. We could talk about the decisions to keep or move on from players like Javonte Williams. There is obviously George Pickens in a situation that needs tended to. While there are various degrees of what a big deal in a small situation, the ultimate reality is that there are plenty of decisions to come to terms. One of the decisions from the Cowboys are likely to have to do with their defensive tackle, Kenny Clark. This may sound a bit of a nowhere given that Clark is acquired in a trade that sent Micah Parsons to the Green Bay Packers, and that the Cowboys raved about how much they love Clark. But in reality, though, the situation is always in the details. It's a 2-year deal, $22 million for this high-level player. And for Dallas teams, it seems like this 29-year-old multi-year solution, and there would be no dead money if the Cowboys choose to release him after this season. It was certainly strange how it was being billed as a positive that the Cowboys would release someone who they deemed as a requirement to the part of the trade, but water under the bridge or whatever. The point here is that the Cowboys seem to always be wandering eye related to Kenny Clark in 2026. So let's get down to where this kind of gratitude's the idea. The Bengals are looking for a golden ticket. And they are needing to replace a few defensive players. You got Trey Hendrickson for 1, Joseph Osai for 2, and Cam Sample for 3. I don't know about you, but those are really big deals. So, does the Bengals show any interest in trading for Kenny Clark? And what would they give up? It's kind of hard. It's kind of sad. Um, we're it doesn't look like the Bengals are willing to release anybody or trade anybody or give up any picks to find a player. And maybe we are just missing that one player. That one player that is going to save the Bengals and going to keep the Bengals defense alive. And I feel like this year, out of all the other years, because every year is important, but this year is more important to obtain players and to make changes to the team to help you win despite whatever Joe Burrow says moving forward. I feel like heading into this offseason, the Bengals need to make it a priority to do what they can for Joe Burrow and tell them, hey, we hear you loud and clear. You were unhappy back in November. You were validated to be unhappy. And this is what we're doing to change it because we want you as happy as you can. We want you to be our quarterback for the next 10, 15 years. And this is what we're going to do to make that a reality. We apologize for upsetting you. We're going to go out and make a deal like a Kenny Clark. We may give up a draft pick or two, but we want you in there. It is important to keep your star players happy, invested, motivated, confident that they could come out here and that they could help lead this team and this organization to a championship. And if you don't get that, guess what? They're going to walk. And we may not see this now. But to this year, this past season, if we don't see Joe Burrow in the next 5 years leave this team to go someone else, I'd be flabbergasted. They must have done something right. Because I wouldn't be surprised if Joe Burrow got up and left and played for another team by next year, after his contract. And we will look back on these dates, these moments, on the reasoning why Joe Burrow up and left. He's in his prime. He's playing his best football despite injuries. And it's up to the Bengals to take it. And look, Joe Burrow, he's not a dumb person. He's seen this happen to multiple players before where they want to invest a lifelong career with one team. And would Joe Burrow want to stay a Bengal? Sure. No hands down, no questions asked. But it has to be under the right circumstances. And the right circumstances is what the Bengals are going to do on the offseason perspective, the players that they're going to bring in to help deliver that championship that we all desire. And if the Bengals decide, hey, we're not going to up and do anything about it, then there's nothing that needs to be done. It's all been said. When his contract is up, he's going to walk out, and he has money. Yeah, I mean, he doesn't need my blessing, but I wouldn't blame him. And I'd turn back around and look for 2026 for this moment to be the leading cause. What did we not do to keep Joe Burrow? And the only fingers we could point at is Zach Taylor, Duke Tobin, and Mike Brown. But that is all the time I have for you guys today. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to our program here on a Tuesday. Tomorrow, I want to talk a little bit about spring training and what we're doing on our YouTube channel. And so it's going to be a little bit more of a boring episode, but I do want to get one in. It's going to fill in some content and give you a perspective of what we're doing here. We'll talk some more sports as well, probably recap Raw that we didn't get to today. But be sure in the meantime to follow us on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram pages. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe on our YouTube channel, and be sure to follow us on our audio platforms. If we're not on our audio platforms, let us know. We'll get on there. And we appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in. And until next time, you guys have a wonderful rest of your evening.